long before computers and printing presses. The memory of the medieval world lived in ink, parchment, and the aching hands of scribes. Every tax, birth, death, and dispute was recorded by patient clerks whose work shaped law, preserved history, and guarded the truth one painstaking line at a time. But behind the neat columns and careful script lay cold rooms, failing light, and a constant battle against mistakes, time, and decay. Tonight, step into the scriptorium, hear the scratch of the quill, and uncover how medieval record-keep quietly held an entire world together. If you love exploring the forgotten foundations of history, hit like, tap subscribe, and let boring history for sleep take you deeper into the past. Before the hum of printing presses and the click of computer keys, the written word in medieval Europe was a slow, deliberate craft. In the flickering lamplight of a chilly scriptorium or the dim corner of a manor hall, a solitary figure bends over a rough table. This is the scribe, a man or, occasionally, a woman whose days are defined by the gentle rasp of quill on parchment, the scent of ink, and the endless parade of words. To be a scribe in the Middle Ages was to embrace a life of discipline, monotony, and occasionally, a rare and profound significance. From the grand abbeys of England and France to the lesser-known priories and town notaries, the production and preservation of records were essential but thankless. Nothing moved quickly. Everything was shaped by patience. The day begins early, with the lighting of candles and the careful arrangement of tools: a penknife for sharpening quills, a bundle of feathered pens, a small pot of ink made from oak galls, a sandarac box for dusting the page. The most precious resource is parchment and animal skin, painstakingly scraped, stretched, and whitened, expensive enough to make each sheet a minor treasure. In wealthier settings, vellum, the finest sort of parchment, made from the skins of young calves, is reserved for important charters, illuminated manuscripts, or Bibles. In monastic scriptoria, the routine is marked by bells, prayer, work, a sparse meal, and then back to the task. The air is chill, even in summer, for the thick walls that keep the books safe from fire also keep out the warmth. The scribe sits at a slanted desk, often for hours without moving. The only sounds, the murmur of Latin, the scratch of the pen, and the shuffle of feet. Occasionally, the master scribe or prior circulates, inspecting work for errors or sloppiness. Secular scribes, those in the service of lords, towns, or merchants, have their own challenges. They record the comings and goings of goods, the boundaries of fields, the decisions of courts, and the lists of taxes paid or owed. A single mistake, an omitted name, a misplaced figure can cause years of trouble. Sometimes they travel, carrying portable writing desks and sheets of parchment in leather rolls, or are called to witness a contract or resolve a dispute. The scribe's tools are simple, but each requires care. Quills must be sharpened just so, ink kept at the right consistency. Parchment is never uniform, rough spots catch the pen, while old scars and holes must be written round, even a tiny slip or blot of ink. A forgotten line may require scraping away the error with a sharp knife or, worse, recopying the entire sheet. In addition to the daily grind of copying records and contracts, some scribes work on more significant projects. A monk may labor for months to produce a single gospel, illuminating its margins with images of saints, animals, and curling vines. In secular courts, scribes copy the same feudal agreements, year after year, updating lists of tenants, rents, or obligations. Some documents, like the Doomsday Book in England, are monumental in their scope and impact. But most records are far more modest and read by anyone but the original parties, and centuries later, curious historians. The job is physically demanding. Hours of hunching over the desk produce aches and stiff fingers, and the flickering light strains even young eyes. Ink stains are a constant badge of the craft, and the cold seeps into every joint. Despite this, mistakes are not easily forgiven, and some scribes, anxious to avoid error, develop elaborate systems of checking and cross-referencing. But why did so much energy go into the creation and preservation of these records? How were archives kept safe from time, fire, or simple neglect? And what, in the end, becomes of the vast tide of names, numbers, and stories so patiently recorded by hands now long gone? Within the thick stone walls of abbeys, castles, and town halls, the records begin to accumulate. Each document a charter, a list, a contract marks a moment in time, intended to settle disputes, document ownership, or serve as proof for generations yet unborn. The world of the medieval record keeper is not only one of writing but of organizing, storing, and, above all, safeguarding against loss. Once the day's copying is finished, documents are carefully dried, sanded, and sometimes bound with ribbons or threads. The most precious records, such as royal charters or abbey land grants, are rolled and placed in chests or cupboards, their locations entered in a register or index. In the grandest churches and courts, these chests may be iron-banded and locked, with only the abbot, lord, or a trusted clerk holding the key. For the majority of written records, storage is more makeshift. Sheaves of parchment tied with string, stacked in wooden boxes, or piled atop shelves. Over time, entire rooms become crowded with these bundles. In humid climates, mold and mildew are constant threats, while mice and insects gnaw at neglected corners. Fire's always a terror in a world of candles, and open hearths can erase centuries in an afternoon. In response, some communities build special archive rooms, lined with stone, the doors kept shut, save for the briefest visits. Monasteries, often the heart of learning and record-keeping, develop their own systems. Chronicles annals of local events, lists of births, deaths, and notable happenings are updated year after year by successive generations of monks. The annalist's job is not glamorous, and the notes are often terse. In this year a great storm ruined the harvest, Brother John died. A new altar was built. Yet, these records, dull as they may seem, are the bedrock of history, the threads that allow later generations to stitch together a sense of the past. Secular record-keeping can be even more complex. Manor courts produce rolls listing the names of tenants, the rents and duties owed, and the decisions of disputes. Tax collectors assemble accounts of what each household owes in coin, crops, or labor. Town scribes record the details of markets, fairs, and contracts. Each record may have legal force. An argument over a boundary stone or an inheritance can hinge on a single line in a fading document. Over time, the archive grows more tangled. Older records are copied, summarized, or referenced in new ones. Margins fill with notes, corrections, and questions from later readers. Sometimes documents are misfiled, hidden, or even deliberately destroyed. Rival claimants might sneak into a lord's archive to alter a record, or a scribe, tired or careless, might muddle a list of names. Disputes erupt decades later. Really owned that strip of meadow, or who was entitled to collect tolls at the bridge. And yet, despite all the obstacles, the persistence of these records is astonishing. Some survive the fall of kingdoms, the sack of cities, even the slow decay of centuries. They are discovered by chance in walls or cellars, their ink faded, their language strange, but their meaning still traceable by those patient enough to decipher them. But what motivates these keepers of records? What satisfaction do they draw from the unending task of copying and preserving the dull minutiae of daily life? And as the centuries turn, what becomes of the scribe's labor when new inventions, the printing press, the ledger book, promise to change everything about the keeping of memory? As time moves forward, the role of the scribe begins to change, but their legacy is felt long after the last quill is set aside. The invention of the printing press in the 15th century sweeps through Europe with astonishing speed, and suddenly, the laborious copying of texts by hand is no longer the sole way to keep or spread knowledge. Yet the silent toil of generations of scribes is what enables this new age to dawn. For centuries, the scribe's work has built the foundation of learning, law, and tradition. The libraries of monasteries and courts, stuffed with parchment rolls and bound volumes, form the seedbeds from which modern archives will grow. The old annals, those dry, repetitive lists of tenants and tolls, births and deaths, sales and disputes, become priceless sources for future historians, genealogists, and dreamers trying to piece together the stories of the past. But what did it mean for those who did the work? For the average medieval scribe, the job was rarely celebrated and often barely noticed. Many toiled in obscurity, their hands cramped and eyes sore, their errors sometimes chided or punished, their accuracy a point of pride, and their handwriting a marker of status and skill. In some monastic communities, a scribe might add a rare personal note at the end of a long manuscript of prayer for the reader, a comment about the weather, or even a plaintive "Let him who reads this pray for the soul of the scribe." These brief flashes of personality reveal the human presence behind the endless columns of numbers and names dot with the coming of print. The scribe's world shifts. Record-keeping does not vanish, far from it, but it becomes faster, more uniform, less personal. Still, for many years, handwritten documents coexist with printed books. Legal documents, birth and death records, land charters, and parish registers continue to be penned by hand, often in much the same way as in the centuries before. Even the printers rely on the labor of scribes to correct and proof their work, and the skills of the medieval record-keeper, patience, accuracy, attention to detail, remain in demand. In the villages and towns of Europe, the archives keep growing. Some survive fire, flood, and war. Others are lost forever, their secrets buried beneath the rubble of lost centuries. Yet, against all odds, a surprising number endure. In a forgotten church chest, in the cellar of a manor house, in the ruins of an abbey, a bundle of centuries-old parchment may one day come to light. When it does, it tells us of the world that once was, of kings and peasants, bakers and millers, births and marriages and deaths, and the endless cycle of human life. And so, as you drift into sleep, imagine a quiet scriptorium at dusk, the last candle guttering the page before you, crowded with neat, tiny script. Beyond the window, the world changes, but inside, the slow work of memory goes on. The scribe's hand may be stilled, but the marks he made remain silent witnesses to a world built, preserved, and sometimes transformed by the patient power of the written word.